So I think Dom, you were the one who brought up the like DEI stuff. So regarding the DEI stuff, it's like, look, right? Like I saw what happened with the Harvard Supreme Court case, which, in case you guys don't remember that, they were like implementing race quotas. It's like if you're Asian or if you're white, they like take marks off of your application, and if you're black or like indigenous or something, and they would add points to your application so that you're like more likely to get in, even though your test score might be lower than someone else who's Asian or white. I just think that that's incredibly unfair, right? And Tristan, not to put you on the spot, but you're the only white person here in this chat room. So here, tell me if like I'm right or if I'm wrong, right? Like, tell me if like you've noticed this too. Like all the people that are kind of pushing for this DEI stuff, they're mostly just white people. Whereas like for me, like who's not white, and for I think Dom, you mentioned this earlier too. Like we have a bunch of like ethnic minorities who are like, no, 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 it's okay, it's okay. Like you don't have to like do this like DEI stuff. Like we can compete, right? Like let us compete fairly with everyone else. And all the white folks are like, no, 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 like we'll give you like extra benefits, and we'll give you like an advantage if you're a minority, because we want to like be nice to you. And then all the minorities like, no, 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 like really, please don't. Right? It's kind of like that, right? Where it's like uh you know uh people fighting for the bill, like at the when you go out to eat. Like I'm not sure if you guys have ever experienced that, or like people will fight over the bill. It's like I'll pay for your dinner this time, and then you're like, no, 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 please just let me pay. And then the other person's like, no, really, it's fine, I can pay. And then you're like, please just let me pay, right? It's kind of like that with DEI, where I feel like all the people that I know that are minorities, they actually don't care about DEI, or they don't want it. And then it's like all these like white upper class liberals who are like, we need DEI because we want like everybody to be diverse. We want our workplace, we want our like society to be diverse and equal. I'm not sure if you get that sense. And let me maybe just pass it to Tristan, since I like picked on you. So I'll let you respond. Do you think I'm right, or do you think I'm just like imagining this stuff?
I mean, in your example that you provided with Harvard, for example, it's not just you know, like there's clearly being priority placed on some ethnic groups over other ones, and that doesn't just it's not just a clear line between you know white, Asian, or anything. Like they've kind of expanded it, and to a certain degree it is a little bit like I understand that we should be incentivizing diversity in our companies, in our businesses, in our political spheres, because we really do need a diversity of thought, because the thoughts that and lifestyle and experiences that I have will be different from someone else who's had a different background, who could have a lot to offer that they have not had the opportunity to offer, that I maybe have had the opportunity to offer. So I understand that this is something that we should be trying to incentivize. The problem is really like how to incentivize it, because the way you use these captas, whatever there are, um, it's very clearly an imperfect solution, because um, you're you're basically saying that an aspect other than the individual's performance is now more important than their performance, something that that person has no control over, right? So, and I think in that regard, that is not a fair necessarily from a individual perspective methodology, but at the same time it's a little bit difficult, because like how do you what's the alternative to give those people the same opportunities, um as other people who have had maybe more opportunities that were provided based on maybe their upbringing or their like where the fact that maybe their family was more situated in the country, for example, like from like an immigrant perspective, like if you're an immigrant who's moved to a new country, it can be more difficult to get set up to get everything under control than if you're someone who's already been here and had a lot of time to put your eggs in the right baskets and set things up. So I yeah, it's a complex problem that I think is
Yeah,
difficult.
no, I get what you're saying, I really do, but it's like so I think in order to analyze this like DEI issue, right? Like, because I can speak from a more like firsthand perspective or more like closer to the action because I am an immigrant not to America but to Canada, and like my parents. Well, I was born in China. My parents were born in China. I moved to Canada when I was around 7 years old. So as a first generation immigrant, maybe like I have like an extra perspective on this, right? So I think if you ask most immigrants, like we just want to be able to compete on a fair like ground, and but we don't necessarily all like want to be given special advantages just for the sake that we're immigrants, right? So in terms of like people from different backgrounds, and you want to like give people who are disadvantaged to begin with like an extra advantage to even out the playing field. I get what you're saying, but I think that that should be focused on your income, and how like financially rather than something like your race, which is like something you're born with that you can't change, you can't control that, right? So that's the first point. And my second point is that Tristan, do you want to make your point before I make my second point?
Sorry, I just wanna comment on something with regards to what you said there, which was that it should be based on your income rather than your race. And I don't necessarily mean that it should be based on your race, but I just I think that I think that income, the difference between someone who makes a little like less money or more money in terms of like diversity of thought, I don't think is as big as like someone who comes from one background or another background that that I think that's what's more valuable, not necessarily like, if I make $10,000 annually versus if I make, $50,000 annually. Am I going to have that diverse of a thought? Maybe, but I think that what you're really going to find is that someone who's, immigrated from China or someone who's immigrated from like the Philippines or something, they're going to have a different perspective than someone who is born and raised in rural uh, Saskatchewan, right? You're going to have a different, and both of these perspectives have some value that I think we should be taking into account. So I want to clarify that I don't think that this is necessarily something that's based on race per se. It's just that there tends to be, in a lot of different places, there will be a predominant race that is the primary, where most people are part of that, where they move to another place. So it's like, if there's someone who is, white who moves from the Philippines, maybe they have a different perspective than someone who is white who lives in Canada. So I just wanted to clarify that piece because I didn't want to. Yeah.
No, I get what you're saying, and so I think maybe so. Let me kind of give my perspective, right, from like as a first generation immigrant. Is like I think as immigrants, we're kind of like there's a deep set fear of us being called a DEI hire. So if DEI is so good, then why is being called a DEI hire an insult, right? It's kind of like so if this DEI thing is kind of pervasive across society, then we might get to a point where we don't know if somebody got hired because that they're the most talented person that was available, or because like some company, some school wanted to fulfill a race quota or whatever, and that's why that person gets chosen, right? And like if as a person from a visible minority here in Canada, if someone were to tell me that like I only got this job. Of course, no one would actually say this like out loud or to my face or anything. But like, if it was the case that somebody told me that I was only hired because I was Asian and we needed an Asian person there because we already have too many like white people or too many black people at this company, and we don't have enough Asians, and that's why we hired you. I think that that would be interpreted as kind of like an insult, right? So I don't want this DEI thing to become like a barrier, and like kind of a tripping stone, which is a lot of, in my opinion, what we've seen already happen in places like the United States, in Canada, where it's like, if you're a minority, then there's this like fear that what if you were hired as a DEI hire, and calling someone DEI hire is kind of like an insult, which is kind of, in my opinion, an indication that this DEI stuff is not good. But that's my opinion. Feel free to disagree. I'm going to pass it to Dom for a quick response, and then we really have to move on to the next story.
When people are like oppressed, that's when it becomes an issue. And I think to a certain extent, like DEI, what was it? Let me check that. That term DEI is like kind of necessary, but when it's like pushed to like a little too far to a certain extent, I think it's like maybe not needed. But I think if you're a part of like trans LGBT, like they've experienced like years and years of oppression. Like I think they don't need to have that much oppression. It should be like appreciated, equally, just like everyone else. Like those communities can do whatever they please as well as ours and such. But I think yeah, just for like DEI as in the sake of like ethnicity hire, I think you're gonna give me this just because of that. I think I don't need like extra scoops of ice cream. I think I'll be okay with like just the two kind of business. So yeah, I do get both sides. So yeah, I'll end at that.
Yeah, makes sense. Tristan, respond very quickly because we got to move on.
Yes, very quickly. So just quickly, I just want to say also that I feel like we should keep in mind the fact that America does have this history that I think, with regards to slavery and the mistreatment of Black people during their history, that I think is also a big factor, because it was very pervasive, and it was deeply entrenched in a lot of the in a lot of aspects of their country, which has made this problem, made the issue of diversity much more prevalent than in other countries where there has not been this historical oppression of one race over others, right? So I just think that it's I think we should keep that in mind as well. There is a bit of trying to right the wrongs of the past that seems to be involved, but it's also like how do you right the wrongs of the past without making more mistakes in the future? It's a balancing. So I'd say it's a balancing act for how to solve this problem.